Good evening. I'm Paul Kaiser. I'm superintendent here at Westfield Schools, and I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. We know you have a lot going on, and the good thing, we are videotaping this, so we'll send this out in the blast, and we can share it with all our friends. But just a few opening comments and then introduction. Um, Self-care, the definition of self-care is taking care of yourself. And there's no more challenging time in our lives than right now. One of my teachers was telling me that their child started, they're in like, I think, second grade now, and most of their time going to school, they've lived under this challenge of COVID, and it's a challenge for all of us. Really, really a challenge in many ways. We learned a lot. We learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about our families. And I think the one thing is that I think life is more precious than ever before. If we think about what we're going through and what we've been through, that family time and that self-reflection and that quality time it's so important to us. Tonight, it's an opportunity for us to talk a little about a chaos in our life, and we've all experienced that. Tonight I'd like to introduce Deborah Honeycutt. Deborah has been a radio personality in Indianapolis for the past 30 years. She's a native of Anderson, Indiana, and Butler University, and graduated with her radio and television degree from the Bulldogs. She remembers jumping up and down in her apartment when she got that first call to go to the Bear at 104.5 for her first job many, many years ago. After that, she moved down the hallway to team up with Jim Denny and Kevin Freeman on 95.5. That's my go-to country station, by the way. I wake up to that every morning. Jim, Deb, and Kevin have been a team for the last 19 years and have been recognized with many awards, the CMA, the ACM, Large Market Personality of the Year. Deborah was awarded the prestigious Gracie Award in 2020. She loves interviewing, believes that everyone has a story to tell. She's writing her first book and hosts a podcast, Deborah Honeycutt, on 3 hours of sleep. And I know what 3 hours of sleep looks like. It's with great pride to introduce Deborah. She lives here in Westfield. Her husband's here and one of her sons, and she has two sons. And we're just proud that she's here tonight to share some of her thoughts on embracing the chaos among us. Thank you.
Hello. Is this working? Okay. Hi, everyone. Listen, I hate to start with some news that I just got, but I kind of hate to do this to you. It's super important. But I was just told, it's been brought to my attention, that the person to your right is a heavy mouth breather. And so that might be a little awkward for the next 30 minutes or so. Not the case, but I do have a son who is 16 years old, and he did come home a couple of months ago, and he shared with me that he was riding in the car with his father, and he was completely annoyed. He said, "Mom, I can't take it anymore. I've been riding in the car with Dad, and he does this noise. Have you heard it?" And I said, I don't think I have. I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, he makes this like noise, this nose whistling with his nostril. And I said, I'm not really familiar with that. Can you imitate it? And so he went on to kind of shut one nostril, and it sounded a little like, a little whir through the nose. And I said, Hayden, I've never heard of that. And so I found myself at the house as Greg is loading the dishwasher and grilling out on the back porch, and I'm kind of leaning in trying to hear this noise, this nose whistling. And it's not been successful so far. And Hayden swears by it. Greg says it's not happening. He has denied the whole thing. So you're probably not going to find a heavy mouth breather to your right. But chances are the person to your right, the person to your left, the person sitting in your seat, and basically all of us, at one point in our life, we have been fearful of change and of making mistakes and doing those things where we end up having bad days and our life gets a little bit chaotic. And that's uncomfortable. That's why we don't like change, because it's not what we know. And it causes us to step outside of our comfort zone. And that's happened to all of us, myself included. So 2 years ago, I found myself lying in bed, and I was in the fetal position, and I was having an ugly cry, and I had tears staining my face, and I was inhaling the largest piece of cake that a person can find. I mean, face planting this cake because I love cake. But it was that moment when I realized that change isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means different. And I had to go through that process before I realized that change was okay. So, as Dr. Kaiser said, my name is Deborah Honeycutt, and tonight I would like to share with you some ways that we can approach change a little bit differently this year. And in helping me do that and showing you how, I would like to share 3 short stories with you. Number 1, about eating that delicious piece of cake and what happened in that moment. I would also like to share a story about a woman named Mary Lou and a $5 bill. And then I would like to share a story about this suitcase that you see sitting up here on stage tonight. Before we get to those things, I do want to recognize, I know it's a busy weeknight, and you've taken time out of your day to be here, and I appreciate that. How many of us have gone to see someone speak before? All of us, right? And so I've been where you are, especially those of you on the aisle seats or sitting in the back, where you're thinking, did I make the best decision with my time? And you might be thinking, that's a really good spot so I can bolt and I can bail if I need to. But you won't need to bail tonight. And I'm not going to make this extremely long, but I am going to tell you that I think it's a conversation that you will remember for years to come. And before we get started, I would like to remind you that, as Dr. Kaiser said, the theme is Embrace the Chaos. And so as I started thinking about speaking here tonight, when I was asked to do so, my son, who's 16 and a junior here at Westfield, he said, okay, I get it. They asked you to share your story, but why you? And, you can't really impress a teenager. I'm just a mom to him who probably doesn't have anything important to say. And the truth is, any of us could be standing up here on stage. We all have a story to tell. And I really do believe that with a passion. But I got to thinking about the things in my Rolodex in my head of items that have happened to me over the years and what would fit, the chaos in my life. And so, number 1, this always comes up because I do not drive my car through the car wash. And that's because years ago, I ran over a guy's foot at the car wash, the employee. That was a fun day. So as a result, trying to line the car up on the track, and as a result, I am fearful of the car wash, so definitely a chaotic day. He's okay, by the way. Now, I consider myself a good cook, but don't ask me to heat you up some taco shells because I burnt these. And if you look closely, I even left the cardboard insert in this front taco, just to see if my family was paying attention. Apparently, that was not a good day in the kitchen. So this looks like a normal day. These are my co-hosts, Jim and Kevin, along with the mayor of Indianapolis, and we had some stage duties and, went off without a hitch. I was pretty proud of our time together on stage until my sister, who's actually in the audience, pointed out at the end of it that I was wearing my shirt backwards. And I thought, how hard is it, Deb, to get dressed and go to work? And so there's proof. I'm wearing the tag in the front. The V-neck was in the back. So that was a fun day. So this was a typical day at work until I had to find some duct tape from the engineer office because I had a strap bust on my undergarment. So I spent 3 songs. Now, country songs aren't very long, like 2.5, 3 minutes. I had 3 songs until I needed to be back on the air, and I grabbed duct tape, and I ended up in the bathroom stall duct taping my undergarment back together. Definitely chaos. Everyone asks, who's your favorite artist? Keith Urban is one of the top 5. He is super kind, very nice guy. You won't hear this interview because I didn't have the microphone plugged in. And it was one of my favorites, but you won't be able to hear it because halfway through it, I saw the cord dangling. I didn't point it out. We just kind of carried on and let him go on his way. And then I'll get to this story here in just a moment of Mary Lou. So a little bit of a chaos has ensued. And let's get back to that delicious piece of cake. So 2 years ago, my oldest son was about to move to college. That's a hard time for any parent. We get emotional. We don't want the change, the different dynamics in our family to take place. And so I found myself feeling very, very upset and fearful of all of the changes that were going to be taking place in our family. And so about 3 weeks out, I could feel that I was struggling, but I didn't say anything. And the day before he was to move, I was on the air, and my co-host innocently happened to mention on the air, "Hey, it's a big day for your son tomorrow, and how are you holding up?" And so I remember saying, "I'm fine." And I said it very quickly, "I'm fine." And the next thing I know, I had this lump in my throat. And I felt my bottom lip start to quiver. And then I heard this unfamiliar voice, and my voice was shaking, and I heard myself out loud say, "But I'm not fine." And then cue the tears. I started crying. And driving home from work that day, I was mortified that I had completely embarrassed myself and shared such a vulnerable moment with 350,000 listeners. But what I found from that is sharing that vulnerability invites people in. And in the days and weeks to come, I received emails from listeners in our audience and messages, private messages on social media, handwritten letters. And I received these messages from various people, some who had said, my moment on the air with my emotional breakdown reminded them of when they sent their daughter or son off to college 15 or 20 years ago. And they knew what it felt like and that I would be okay. I heard from people who said they had kids the same age as my oldest, and they were moving that week or the next week, or they had just gotten home from their move, and they were emotional too, and they understood how I felt. And then I heard, and this one just amazes me, I heard from one lady who said, "I was rocking my baby, and I had tears going down my face, and I was crying along with you." And she said, "I got so emotional because people tell me that kids grow up fast and that I would be in the same position in a short 18 years. And that blew my mind. And it was a lesson learned to lean on others when you're going through a hard time. I'm getting emotional now. Bottling it all up doesn't help. And so leaning on others is definitely a way to express what you're going through. And often what happens is people have been able to relate, and someone's gone through what you've gone through, or maybe you're helping somebody else out by sharing. So that was a really big lesson for me, is to lean on others. And what was interesting is I tell stories for a living. I tell stories about everyday life and my family, what I've been doing on the air all the time, Monday through Friday, and I didn't tell that story. You know, there's no reason I should have suffered alone. There was no reason that I should not have shared that. I am also very logical and aware of the fact that eventually I was going to be okay. There is no parent support group for moms or dads that never get over their kids moving out of the house. You know, we eventually want them to go. We don't want a 30-year-old in our basement wanting to play Scrabble. So I wanted that for him, but I just didn't want to go through it. So lesson number 1 was lean on others. The second lesson that I've learned over the years is to shift your perspective. And it started probably when I was a freshman at Butler. You know, I graduated in Anderson, and I went to Butler not really knowing what to expect. I had a random roommate, nothing like now where you can kind of get on a Facebook and meet somebody and find somebody that has something in common with you. And so this is totally random. I got to Butler, I walked in the door, and I'm okay with it being somebody completely different, but I knew instantly we didn't really have a whole lot in common. Sometimes the best friendships are born from that. But she immediately said, "I'm Veranda with a V." And I said, "Well, I'm Deborah with a D." And she said, "I have one rule." And I thought, okay, I can respect that. What's your rule? And she paused for a second, and she said, "You are not to in any way touch or wear my Metallica t-shirts." Not a problem. That was very important to her. And so that kind of began the differences, and I realizing that sometimes things the way I see them are not exactly how they're portrayed. And so I definitely didn't share the same perspective as a professor of mine. I had a professor who assigned a 97-page screenplay. And he thought it would be a great idea, which it probably was, to do a little by little as we go throughout the semester. And then at the end of the semester, your final grade is your 97-page screenplay. Well, I didn't really adopt that attitude. And so I waited the entire semester. And then when it was finally due, the day before it was due, I started. I don't recommend it. But I pulled an all-nighter. So I was in my sorority house, and girls were coming back from being out for the evening. It was 12:30, 1 in the morning, 3 a.m., and there I sat with my word processor. That shows you how long ago this was. And I was feverishly writing these pages for my screenplay. It was due at 10 o'clock the next morning. At 9:50, I'm putting it in a binder, 9:50 a.m., and I bolt out the door. I run across campus. Butler wasn't, not that big of a campus, and I get it to the professor's classroom. I submit it. A week later, I get it back. I got a B-. I was quite proud of myself. B-, not bad for one day's work, with a note. And the note said, probably could have spent a little more time on this. And he wasn't wrong. So I learned that the perspectives were a little bit different. But I'm often asked in radio, who is your favorite interview? And of course, I mentioned Keith Urban, nice guy, super nice, just down-to-earth kind. But my favorite interview will always be, I'll take it to my grave, Wynonna Judd. And Wynonna, if you're not a country fan, is part of a duo called the Judds. They don't really tour anymore, but it's she and her mother. And we were doing an interview together. The guys couldn't join me, so it was just me by myself. And I love to do these. And I thought, I'm going to ask her a question that she's maybe not been asked before. That's one of my favorite things, is to try and ask them, because they do interviews all day, every day, something they haven't heard. So my question to Wynonna was, can you tell me something about yourself that even the biggest Wynonna fan, something about yourself that most of us would not know? And she didn't respond. She paused for a moment. And when you're doing an interview and you hear no response, complete silence, you panic. It is the worst feeling. You never want to offend anybody. And for a minute there, I thought I'd made her mad. I mean, this was a very long, awkward pause. And then all of a sudden, I heard a very deep breath. And Wynonna exhaled very loudly. She took this deep breath, and she said, I have this thing. And I instantly sat up and listened a little more intently. And she said, I have this thing where I'm supposed to appear in public, and I'll tell my manager I'm just not going to go. And I didn't understand that. So she paused for another minute, and then she went on, and she said, I have this thing where I get so worked up about my appearance, about getting there on time. I change outfits so many times that eventually I give up. She said, it's a really big thing for me. I really struggle with it. And I loved her perspective. I think I, as an interviewer, was expecting the celebrity to say, I love French toast, or I have a pet peeve of people being late. I love street tacos. Something not super earth-shattering. But I loved her vulnerability and her ability to say, here's what I struggle with, and putting it out there. It was a big moment that, I didn't really even care if we ever aired it. We were recording it for another day. I didn't even care if we aired it. I love the fact that we had that moment and that she shared her vulnerable side because it invited me in. And it was a different perspective of what I expected. That will always be my all-time favorite interview. And, she went on to say that she'll bail on events, and her manager or her publicist will say, it's not an option. We are committed to being there. You're doing the ribbon cutting, or you're appearing on a parade, on a float at the parade. And so not going is not an option. And she says, I struggle with it on a daily basis. It was a different perspective. So the older son, who's now a junior in college, we were celebrating his birthday. I think he was 12, 13 years old. So this was years ago. He just turned 20. And we went to one of those hibachi places. And for any of us who have kids have a birthday on a weeknight, it's stressful. We had to pick him up from football. He still had homework to finish. I wanted to recognize this special day. So we get to the hibachi place, and we're seated across from another family. And I'm feeling like frazzled, like, oh my gosh, we got to rush it all, like open your gift, and we got to do all this stuff, and I'm stressed. And I happen to look across the way from me, and I see a lady, and she happens to make eye contact, and a lovely elderly lady, very sweet looking, and she smiled at me and my family. And I remember leaning over to my husband saying, "Isn't she sweet?" And we went about our business, and we ate our dinner. Before that family left, because they finished before we did, I felt a tap on my shoulder. And so I turned around, and there stood this lady, and this is her right here. And she said, "Hi, my name is Mary Lou." And I said, "Well, I'm Deborah," with a D. And she's holding a $5 bill. And I thought, what is this for? And she said, "I can see you're celebrating something. And if it's your son's birthday, if you don't mind, I would like to hand him this $5 bill." We didn't know her. And I instantly welled up with tears. I think that she caused me to change my perspective. I was trying to rush through dinner. I was wanting to check the boxes. I was feeling chaos. It was his birthday, and he had football practice, and he still had homework. I knew he was going to be up late when we got home. And she caused me to stop for a minute and to pause, and showed what life is truly all about. In that moment, I wish we had a million more Mary Lou's in this world. Of course, I think my younger son was wanting to know if Mary Lou was going to be at his birthday celebration a little bit later. But the point of this is, we still talk about Mary Lou to this day. I asked if we could have a picture because it touched my heart. I thought it was the sweetest thing. So how many of us, when we travel, how many of us are overpackers? I'm the first to admit it, yes. I overpack. If I'm going away for a 3-day weekend, I want to take 10 outfits, so I have choices, because not everything fits the same on the same days or the same weeks. And then when I get home, I will likely not unpack right away. It'll take days, or as my husband would say, maybe weeks, maybe a month last time. And so same goes with our suitcase of emotions. I brought this up here on stage tonight because we all carry one, and we drag it around with emotions from years and years ago, and it weighs us down. We stuff every zipper and every crevice with items from years gone by that we'll never use again. It serves us no purpose. I'm talking fear and anxiety, failed relationships, difficult decisions. It's all stuffed in that suitcase. But there's one problem with that. We stuff all of those things in from year after year. We drag it with us everywhere we go. And the one problem with that is there's no room for the good that is yet to come. There's no place to put it. So I'm inviting you all, with all of our chaotic moments in life, to unpack your suitcase. Start pulling things out. To let go of those things that are weighing you down. Embracing the chaos means expecting that we're going to have bad days. I always tell my kids, we're going to have a bad day. It's how we respond. You've heard the phrase, it's a bad day, it's not a bad life. It's all how we respond to it. So unpack your suitcase. And when those things happen, embrace it. Lean on others. Shift your perspective. And then unpack your suitcase. Poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow once said, "Into each life, some rain must fall." And that's true with anybody. So if we can expect that and embrace those moments when they do happen, makes life a little bit easier, especially after the crash course in change and a different life that we've experienced in 2020. So this is for teachers and staff and faculty and parents and students and families. I invite you to do that with me and allow yourself some grace as we return to the best norm that we can find. Have a safe trip home tonight, and thank you for being here.